Apamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at apamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be back together again. And I have handouts. So what this is a kind of graphic representation of these levels. And in the first column, you'll see the first part of the double helix spiral, life conditions outside. And then the second column is mind capacities inside. And then there's a column, these next two columns are the columns that I added, that they're my interpretations on individual spirituality and spiritual collectives. So I'm going to talk about this today, but you don't need to have the handout to understand what I'm talking about. As I mentioned earlier, what holds groups together are their values. It's not that everyone has the same values, but that the values of the group are somehow congruent with our personal values. We may even find our own values evolving and expanding through the group. This definitely was the effect that Sangha had on me. So what does the Graves model have to do with trust and community? We'll talk about this today as we reflect on how individuals and communities evolve in spiritual terms. So not just psychologically, not just socially, but spiritually. Remember, this is the warning label, that Graves himself warned about labeling people with this model. Please don't do that. These are systems of value structures, ways of seeing and believing a world. They organize and make meaningful our worldview and shape our behaviors and beliefs. They are not qualities we possess, nor are they some kind of attainment to strive for. More likely, it means that when we cherry pick on what we're experiencing from the world, we're choosing according to this structure, right? We're choosing to notice, pay attention to, make sense out of the world in accord with this structure. So Graves didn't study spiritual development in those terms. So that's something that I have made an effort to describe how this model might help us understand both the spiritual journey of individuals and also of spiritual communities. And you probably have a little glimmer of that from what we've already talked about in terms of the basic model itself. I think you can clearly see, let's see, continuing with the warning label. It means we can talk about, for example, blue level thinking, but we can't talk about blue level people, so remember that. It's really easy for us to start thinking, well, he's just a blue level guy, please don't do that. As I mentioned yesterday, people are generally moving through a stage and may be at the beginning, middle, or end of it. And for another thing, people may have different value structures for different aspects of their lives. Remember that they might have a blue level value structure for work, and they might have a green level value structure for home. Go to the football game, it's all red level, but you can clearly see once you know this model, which level of thinking, which value structure is being used in a given situation. People will constantly tell you. But as I see it, a big part of trust and community depends on that community's values and how those values are actually enacted in their practices, activities, and relationships. So I will say there's a difference, and often a pretty serious difference, between the espoused values of an organization or a community and what's enacted in practice. Right? So we see this all the time. So that's another consideration when we're talking collectively, when we're talking in groups. They're their espoused values, and even a group like the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, it's quite startling the way their espoused values have little to do with the way they're conducting business as an organization. So that's not uncommon, I think. But the collective values of a community are distinct from any individual or group of individuals. In Zen, at least, this is the result of the Buddha's teachings. That's what grounds this kind of spiritual community, right? So we are all coming to terms with the ways that these teachings impact our values. For example, studying the precepts often impacts people's values. Studying the paramitas, the practices of perfection, and thinking about them often has an effect on how people hold their values. Does that make sense? Make sense to you guys? Okay, so I'm going to talk us through this so you don't really actually need to have the handout. In beige level, the life conditions outside are what nature and instinct provide. So in spiritual terms, it means there's no real evidence of spirituality emerging yet. Basic survival needs are to be met. And in group terms, the spiritual group focuses on basic survival, finding a place to meet, trying to meet basic expenses in order to survive. There's not yet any doctrine, obviously, or any social structure really to speak of. So this is sort of before community formation, really. There isn't really any, there's kind of a rough family clan structure in beige level, but there isn't really a collective formation. And I would say it's kind of like when I spent 23 years sitting in meditation alone without a teacher or a sangha. So I'd read books about meditation and I was trying to practice, but it's a state of general ignorance and confusion, basically. Some of you may have experienced that. So there's not much to say about beige level, except it lasts a really, really, really long time in the evolution of humans. So might not last a really long time for an individual, or even for a sangha. So purple level, then the transition to purple level is the environment is a mysterious harmony and reciprocity, as I said. Natural patterns become meaningful. There are things to be known. The environment is magical and fraught with patterns that have meanings. Stars form constellations. The moon waxes and wanes. The fishing is better in spring. The geese migrate north in the fall. The elders have wisdom gained over the years and generations. So people are drawn to that wisdom that can guide them through the tough times and to prosperity. So we talked about this yesterday. So for the mind capacities we endeavor to placate the spirits and follow ancestral ways and the wisdom of the elders, and ritual kind of emerges. So you can, Grace was very, very clear that you can't map this onto child development, for example. This is not like now we're at the toddler stage and this happens, that's not the way it works. So he felt that in children, all of the levels were present at once. And you would see them emerge, So there is a sense of the world in individual spirituality. There's a sense of the world as mysterious, filled with awe and terrifying. At this level, individuals either feel themselves as a bridge to the spirit world, these are the shamans or priests, or as dependent on those who are. We just have to follow these shamans and priests. Apprenticeships are the teaching model. Reverence is tinged with fear. I think in my terms, sort of my personal experience, I met Joko and I was struck by her presence. I immediately sensed her wisdom. I just wanted to absorb as much of it as possible. I just wanted to follow her around and just absorb it. So at this level, people trust the elders' knowledge. So it's the beginnings of community development, and a group begins to form around the wise elders. So, and then I think there's kind of a rich trove of lore and practices and stories that evolves at the group level, as well as a kind of reverence for leaders and elders that connects members of the group. So we start to get the stories of the creation of the world, the magical stories of what the fish brought us, what the salmon taught us, And that's very much a part of this purple level. And the red level, as we talked about, the understanding of the environment is that it's rough and hard like a jungle. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And the internal capacities are the fight to survive in spite of others, to seek glory, to avoid shame, and to express self. So what Graves understood as he looked at these, the sequence of these levels, was that each level was either an express self level, or that is, it's self-oriented and expressing the self was what's most important, or a self-sacrifice level, and they alternated. So this red level is an express self level. It's really, I'm going to grab hold of the world and, and so it's driven by impulse to exert power and control by strength and even violence, to take from the environment whatever is desired. So a strong, fearless leader offers protection and spoils in exchange for absolute loyalty. And as I said, loyalty is sort of the seed of faith, right? It's the beginning of faith, the early form of faith. So communities, tribes really, focus on competing for favor and dreading punishment or disapproval. So in the individual, the level is characterized by, in spiritual development, is characterized by fierceness and expressiveness. Ordeals provide a way to prove one's spiritual strength and status. There's a powerful sense of command through imposing one's will on the universe. There's no higher power than the most forceful, commanding person. If you're not that person, you're a basic follower whose loyalty is required. So there are still some organizations that are run this way. I said in the spiritual collectives, this is where cults emerge with their focus on a powerful leader who demands absolute loyalty and obedience. Views of the leader are absolutes and often arbitrary. There are severe punishments for those who step out of line or raise questions. Fear and submission are the general rule. Members prove themselves by loyalty, heroic efforts, or ordeals, and are constantly challenged. Competition for the leader's favor can be brutal. So it's always ongoing, right? And who's the leader? Well, the one with many wives. So what I said about this is challenges to authority are swiftly and harshly punished. Trust in each other or in the leader is non-existent. Fear and competition govern the group, and the promise of plunder. I would say this level is characterized by raw energy, strength, and power. It is the proto-beginnings of faith and the requirement for loyalty, and it is committed to embodied action. Red energy is the fire, that will to thrive and survive through action and strength. It's the beginning of the energy for building, not just responding to nature, but conquering it. And the courage to be independent, to forge a kind of coalition for action. We don't have much of this level in Zen, but there are a few bombastic teachers that draw on red level energy. I will tell you that there's one teacher on the West Coast. You can't find his place. You have to ferret it out. There's no sign or anything on it. He's a former Navy SEAL. They actually break people's arms in the kind of rigors of the training there, and for some reason it persists. And he's a Maizumi Dharma heir, but it's that kind of macho-driven Zen, which we don't see so much of here. There's probably a little bit more of it in Rinzai tradition, and the Rinzai tradition is much more muscular, kind of vigorous. Okay, anyway. So you can see some of it in the koans, though, in which the master cuts off the finger of a hapless monk or slices a cat in half. There's this sense of urgency. So for the Sangha, evolving through that level helped us break free from the traditional forms, helped us move here and make this space our own. This is it's kind of that kind of energy, that kind of raw energy. And we had to proceed really by impulse because we didn't know anything yet, and all we were trying to do was carve out a space for us that was not just like the old ways. So we struck out on our own with a band of loyal companions, I might say. We became a kind of a tribe then, taking over this place and shaping it to our needs. I don't think we ever experienced the raw demand for loyalty and the granting of perks and punishments on that basis. I don't think we ever went that far. But some communities do, even so. And as each level includes and transcends all of the previous levels, we brought along from Purple that sense of awe and a reverence for the wisdom of the elders and the magical pieces of nature, right? That experience. So the Buddhas and the ancestors accumulated and handed down through the generations this kind of purple level wisdom. At this level, people trust strength and respect strength. Strong leaders command respect, and the community trusts them. That's the red level. In the blue level, the life conditions outside are that we're vulnerable to evil, that there's a fear of society at risk, the whole society at risk and danger. And so the mind capacities inside become to obey rightful authority with purpose and sacrifice self. This is a sacrifice self level. So you see people sacrifice themselves to their corporation, their blue level corporation, or to the Catholic Church, or to, like they are committed to that kind of blue level structure, whatever it might be. But they're always hierarchical. There's always a being at the top. It might be God, it might be the CEO, it might be the admiral, it might be, but their authority is unquestioned. And it's all of the authority is organized hierarchically from top to bottom. So in terms of individual spirituality, this is sacrifice of self for God or some external higher power. Acceptance of deferred reward for obedience to rules and institutions. So this is, you're going to go to heaven, if you help us with the fund drive for the schools in Africa. Denominations. So let's see, the church arises and the individual belongs and accepts its hierarchical structure, practices, and rules of behavior. Teaching is by instruction in doctrine. That's a pedagogical method. So spirituality becomes religion here. Institutional formation emerges here. Denominations, social structures of committees, boards, fundraising, tithing, asset management, their policies, classes, regular religious services, missions, charity, role responsibilities, missionaries, many opportunities for serving beyond oneself. Even if you're just going to be the bingo caller for bingo. So this is at blue level. So what I had to say about this is the environment inevitably, red evolves to blue. Red is not a sustainable model for more than just a tiny band of people, we hope. So a hierarchical structure arises to provide more stability and clarity in relationships, and clarify the relationships within the organization, right? A dominant authority at the top is an analog to the red level leader, but is generally not subject to challenges because of the structure. The leader is an unquestioned authority, but usually benign, typically benign. The followers are organized in tiers and ladders, which gives more structure to the community and gives some hope of movement, right? You can get promoted, and that's a hopeful prospect. So there's hope and incentives, privileges, perks, corner office, power, money, now primarily for those who work hard to maintain the structure. That becomes the focus of attention rather than like the heart of the spiritual teachings. That tends to be the trajectory for those blue level organizations. So people will often, so seniority is important, and people will often refer to the security they find there. So they'll say, well, I would leave this job, but it gives me security. And my dad was in the Navy for 25 years, loathed every minute of it, but it gave him security for his family, and medical care and dental care and things like that. So that was important to somebody coming out of the Depression, that kind of stability and that kind of assurance. And that kind of a structure that you could understand, you know what the rules are very clear, you follow the rules, you succeed. And that's how it works. So as we discussed yesterday, this is an organizational structure most of us are quite familiar with in various ways. School is sometimes set up that way. In such a hierarchy, you're either in or out, either in the Navy or not, in the Catholic Church or not, in IBM or not. Furthermore, if in, you have a very clear understanding of just where you are in the hierarchy. In fact, the hierarchy will often help you by providing like placement tests to figure out where you're going to fit in the hierarchy. So you'll have career tests, or you'll have some kind of psychological tests or whatever, so that you can be placed where you belong in the hierarchy. There are abundant signs in the environment that show you where you are. Do you have a cubicle, or do you have an office of your own, for example? Like, there's all kinds of signs built into the environment that show you exactly where you are. Hierarchies are structured around rules, policies, norms, and tacit agreements, thrown into our awareness often only when they are violated. So we don't even know, like at the university, we once got, reprimanded for something that we did that broke the rules that had not been written anywhere or provided to us. So it's like some of these are tacit, you're just supposed to know them. And it was a very arcane and complicated thing that we could not have possibly known. So they didn't punish us too severely, but we were on notice, and we're kind of like, they're skeptical about us. So many traditional religions, including Japanese Zen, are organized this way. It tends to happen over time as people try to create a structure to preserve the teachings, and then the structure becomes the thing instead of the teachings. So its intent is protective initially. Let's make sure that we can convey this correctly. Let's make sure that we can authentically convey this down to future generations. So institutions make sense in that way. It's not the way Zen has traditionally been transmitted, not through institutions, not through texts, but warm hand to warm hand, as we say, So that, in that way, it's quite different, although there is a whole institutional structure which is extremely hierarchical around Zen in Japan in particular, and those models in the US that have tried to emulate that. So you have an abbot, you have, an Inu who's responsible for protocol, you have a Tenzo responsible for cooking, there's this sense of a structured hierarchy. So while the stability and continuity and order it produces are appealing for many, hierarchical structures can become narrow-minded, oppressive, and sources of suffering despite their good intentions and teachings. They can perpetuate systemic biases and a world of suffering. Still, evolving through Red Level, we began to develop the forms, practices, and social organization of Blue Level, teaching precepts, forming a board, creating councils, teaching classes. The raw energy of Red Level is still present in our practice. It provides the fire, the vigor, and commitment. But now, in Blue Level, we could get ourselves organized. The teachers got more training themselves in Zen and other areas too, like Hakomi, IFS, right use of power. An organizational architecture began to take place. It takes some kind of shape and form. We were very familiar with the Japanese hierarchy, having trained in it for many years. We didn't want that. We wanted to create something new, something practical, yet permeated with the Dharma, moving towards orange level thinking. But we were also drawing on the energy and loyalty of the red level, the awe and mystery of the purple level, while evolving from the blue level to the orange level as a Sangha. So it started to happen. So the life conditions outside for orange level thinking are, this is how the environment is understood and experienced. It's full of opportunities for success. It's competitive. And then the mind capacities inside are to pragmatically test options for success, and then express self. It's an express self one. So I always think that sort of the canonical orange level thinker is a salesman who's like, yeah, they want me to fill out all these forms back at the office, but I've got people to see, I've got things I've got to do, I've got a new idea for how I can, build out a whole aspect of our business, and their success is going to be measured in terms of sales, right? So it's a metric. So in terms of individual spirituality on this, our little map, spirituality is a self-improvement project, getting a better me, often in the service of becoming more successful in the material world. Much of the corporate mindfulness movement is grounded here, shopping for the best spiritual deal for me, what feels right to me, what works. In terms of spiritual collectives, this is religious entrepreneurialism, concerned with metrics such as growth of the congregation, success of fund appeals, adopting cultural trends and fads, guitar mass, karaoke and Zen temples, actually, creative and innovative services, church as a place for people to make connections that will advance their material success, right? So often talking, yeah, go to church and make connections. You can build your business that way, right? Okay, so I think in what I was thinking about this is sort of recognizing the constraints of the hierarchical structure and seeking freer creative expression, entrepreneurial communities and organizations spring up. The old impulse to control, compare, and win return, but they're civilized now. They're channeled into creative endeavors and inventive approaches. Not quite so raw and a little bit more socially appropriate. Progress and achievement are goals that can be measured and new methods can be experimented with to improve performance. So we try out a new program. Do people show up? They don't show up. They make contributions. They don't make contributions. So I think you see in the general spiritual landscape, this is the rise of spiritual celebrities, of people who develop online spiritual courses, and just this entrepreneurial spirit in the spiritual world, and so you can't fault this, but it's just kind of an interesting phenomenon, I think. That you see, here are these spiritual celebrities. They're going from conference to conference. They're being drafted to do online courses, and it's bringing in income. And I'm assuming that income comes into the community, so not a bad thing, right? So at Appamata, we began to incorporate some innovation, since this is also the level of creativity and invention. Inquiry, integrated intensives, community sharing of rakusus, these were all innovations that came out of our thinking. They were not so much a rejection of the past as a repurposing and creative extension of it. That's sort of how I think of it. Evolution, not revolution. We were keenly aware of which activities were better attended, which had few participants. We began to be more attentive to the bookkeeping and accounting numbers. In orange level thinking, people believe in the virtue and merit of success, the fairness of meritocracy. People trust in the metrics and the perceived success of the venture at this level. So they're very attuned to whether our contributions falling off, or we're 20% ahead of where we were last year. This is all part of that. However, we cannot be driven by these concerns. We cannot shape our offerings around them. We need to care for people. A sangha is not a business that succeeds or fails, meets its quarterly goals or falls short. It's important to manage the business side of running the sangha, but the business side cannot manage the sangha. So as I was saying, did I tell you about what happened to us in the landscape business with this? With our accountants came to us and they said, okay, so we've been over the books, and what we've discovered is that your highest profit margins are with grass seed. So when you're planting grass seed, you make the highest margin. So just do that. And I thought, we are not going to sit in some guy's living room and say to him, yeah, we're just planting grass, basically. So we had to advise them, yeah, we can't run the business based on your advice. We've got to have a landscape business where we plant trees and flowers and shrubs and actually make a landscape. They were so confused because, it's all about the profit margins. So we can't let the sangha be driven by market concerns. And that's the challenge, because it's such it's so immersive in our culture, to think that way and to measure our success in certain metrics, right? So that falls apart. How are we now seeing the environment at green level? the natural habitat of all living things. Abundance is the norm. There's plenty, and there's plenty for everyone, and we can offer the Dharma freely because there's plenty of Dharma. And this is the beginning of forming interdependent communities, a sense of inclusiveness. This is another sacrifice self level. What are we sacrificing to? Not to the organization now, not to some hierarchical structure, but to the community. So, in terms of individual spirituality, this means a shift away from formal institutions and into smaller, informal spiritual groups, or toward religions such as Unitarianism, with a focus on inclusiveness and tolerance of other belief systems. Egalitarianism is the rule. Other belief systems are openly tolerated and even explored. Spirituality might take the form of service in the world, Doctors Without Borders, hospice volunteers, working in soup kitchens, a strong sense of mission about helping everyone and providing a sense of belonging and care for others. This is what we feel individually. In terms of spiritual collectives, these are non-institutional collectives. They're study groups, meetups, practice communities without a leader or a priest, democratic organizations with a flat structure, or the priest is kind of a facilitator, not so much an authority. So these are democratic organizations with a kind of a flat structure where everyone's opinion is equal to everyone else's. The focus may be on the environment or social justice or spiritual study, broadly defined. So, eclectic membership with diverse views. The most important value is community, and people are expected to be willing to sacrifice self-interest to that ideal. Teachings are drawn from many sources without explicit beliefs. So, green level. So as we discussed, the successes and limitations of the orange level leave a sense of emptiness. And its striving creates feelings of isolation and alienation, even at the height of success. So many are left behind, the vulnerable, the very young, and the very old, the disabled, anyone who can't compete and win. The metrics are punishing. Some folks can't afford to pay for a class or an intensive. One feels alone in the midst of the community. There arises then a form of community that values connection, acceptance, and care for all beings, and an aspiration to help the world. Such communities warmly welcome newcomers and make efforts to help them orient themselves and feel included, a stark contrast to the competitiveness and individualism of the orange level. They are most pained by the idea that anyone would be excluded, would feel uncared for or neglected. There's a sense of merging with the community, happily adopting its core values and norms as an unquestioned good. Many spiritual communities are structured this way. They worry about inclusivity and work to be even more welcoming. They are not driven by metrics or other markers of success. They just want to be kind. Green level brought with it, for us, the concept of care, of appamada, and the new focus on relational Zen. There's a sense of responsibility for others in a variety of ways. Buddhist Action Now, a care committee, and so on. It became important to endeavor to make appamada welcoming and inclusive for all. Potlucks, film nights, orientation are all part of that green level set of values. Most importantly, the Generosity Initiative ensured that no one would feel financially disadvantaged. The Dharma is freely offered in the field of generosity. A sense of community develops, but this too can be a bit confining and exhausting as the community struggles to take care of everyone and everything. Not everyone, it turns out, as I said, can make use of what we offer. Not everyone wants to belong, to be included. The care committee falls apart. Diversity initiatives lose traction, despite our good intentions. And furthermore, people come and go, commitment varies, and the community can grow weary of the constant effort to maintain its ideals for care. They judge themselves and others harshly for these failures. At green level, people trust the goodwill and intentions of others in the community, the goodness of the community itself. That's why they're willing to sacrifice themselves. So inevitably, these dilemmas and stresses and pressures, the success of the previous level, creates a shift. The shift is to yellow level, and in our little map, The environment for yellow level is a complex system at risk of collapse, as I said yesterday, a sort of looming sense of scarcity of resources. And then the mind capacities are learn how to survive and understand flexibility and flow, express self with others. So at this level, people may not even identify themselves as spiritual. They're curious, but not driven to seek or commit to a path or a group. They're open and flexible about others' beliefs. Belonging or not belonging to a spiritual community are of no particular concern. Yet there's a great deal of compassion and a focus on offering a benefit in the world. They're just aware that they're not going to be able to save everybody, feed everybody, clothe everybody, care for everybody. This is without either anxiety or despair about the enormity of what is needed. They simply set about doing what they are able to do without remorse. They connect with others as needed to develop particular projects to benefit the world. They're little interested in material sort of markers of success. So they're just as happy sleeping on the floor of somebody in another country as they are in a fancy hotel with lots of amenities. So it's just not a concern or interest for them in yellow level thinking. So in terms of spiritual collectives, they sort of freely form and disband. They easily connect with others, merge with other groups, or separate as needed. There are no hard boundaries and no fixed agenda. Strong integration with technology for network effects, and you see a lot of yellow level activity online. And novel ways of providing spiritual guidance, teachings, and supports, like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, phone apps, the Calm app, insight meditation apps, things like that are all coming out of this. There's no self-promotion, no central leader, no rigid belief systems. It's almost difficult to call it spiritual, as even these boundaries become permeable. There's no sense of compulsion or urgent mission as there is in green. So I would say, so as we said, green level can be exhausting and people can get depleted, and there's so many things to attend to. You have recycling, minding your speech so that you don't offend anybody or make anybody feel bad, long hours coming to consensus on every issue. So compassion fatigue becomes a real thing in green level, right? And in fact, not everyone can be included after all. So senior teachers age, they move far away, everything seems to be in a state of flux with no center, what's going on. And for some people, this is very unsettling. This is a kind of a groundless feeling because actually there is no ground, but we've sort of had the illusion of that up to this point, and now we're beginning to recognize, oh, there actually isn't any ground. Yellow thinking prevails. At yellow level, people live in a fluid, self-organizing movement, often between different spiritual groups or traditions. As I said, may not consider themselves spiritual, but they definitely do not seek to belong to something, nor for the stability of established institutions. They find that really repugnant. They may be drawn by curiosity to explore all these other things, yoga and shamanism and mystical Christianity, as I said. I think characteristic of this is a conference I went to, Wisdom 2.0 conference. So I was really excited to go to this conference because Joan Halifax was going to be speaking, and there were a bunch of towering figures from my world. But then there was also like Eckhart Tolle, and there was a bunch of shamans, and there was a drumming group from Rwanda of Hutus and Tutsis, and it was such an eclectic, odd, incoherent mix in a way. Of course, I enjoyed listening to Joan Halifax talking about taking 1,000 doctors to Nepal to work in the little villages and give medical care. All of that was inspiring. But at the same time, I was kind of like, what am I doing here? What is this actually about? And is there some organization behind it? Well, there's the Wisdom 2.0 organization that's behind it, but there's kind of no there. And so this is kind of an example of a yellow level. They had an art exhibit. And it was, sort of these visionary artists. And the visionary artists, I don't know, I guess it's kind of endearing because they mix aspects of sort of primitive art and some sort of visionary. So there'll be an eye, and then there'll be a pyramid, and there'll be a sun and a moon, and then there'll be a fish, and you're just like, okay, yeah, okay. he saw this in a vision, I guess, you know? So anyway, they tend not to settle anywhere. They view life as offering abundant riches and many ways to connect with others for a project, a trek, a weekend retreat. They seldom settle down for long, and an enduring community is not a priority. There are some communities that work this way, meeting at different people's homes, exploring different spiritual practices, and some may even say they're not spiritual at all. In some sense, the Householder Sangha is a naturally yellow level Sangha, as people come and go, right? Differing levels of commitment at different points or different times. And we're not expecting the kind of commitment a person has when they enter a monastery, for example, or when they become a resident in a temple. So yellow level, however, is not aimless or apathetic. I would say just fluid and pathless. It's without a sense of commitment or responsibility to a group. People in this system trust themselves. So this is a mix of expressed self and sacrificed self, because they will sacrifice themselves for something that they're working on that they think will benefit the world. So they trust themselves even when they have no idea what they're doing and where they're headed. No idea. Some in the community will long for the order of blue level or the caring bonds of green level to return. But the whole system has opened up to the field of impermanence and these flows of our Householder Sangha with its comings and goings. There's nothing to hold on to, and that can be quite disorienting. It may even feel that we have lost our common purpose, our shared aspiration and vow. And certainly I feel like the Sangha went through a sort of shaky period like that, right, in this transition. But it's all there. All of the previous levels, those earlier ways of comprehending the world, yet we can feel that each one of them is incomplete. Still, it's true that the meanings that we found in the past no longer hold the world together. And we may find ourselves wondering what it all adds up to. If everything is flux and flow, what is our life about, and what are we even together? Why are we even together? Is it all just noise and chaos? So we've talked about this, this transitional stage. And some people wander off, they're sort of dissatisfied. But we have to be curious about what comes next. Wouldn't you want to stick around to find out what turquoise level reveals? Because that's the level we finally come to. The environment is characterized by a single living entity expanding and contracting, like the breath, as I talked about yesterday, right? That's what the environment is seen as. And mind capacities are to seek order and form within chaos. Cosmic consciousness, self is unpersonal and unbounded. So we talked about this yesterday, right? So there's a profound sense of meaning at the level of the cosmos that arises, and with it, a sense of wholeness and a deeper, more boundless compassion. Tibetans call it the creative intelligence of the universe, or pristine awareness. Through this connection, the person simply puts him or herself in service. They become a direct conduit to the vast, timeless wisdom that is what the Buddha and other true spiritual guides have experienced, expressed, and pointed to all along. There's no I, there's merely this. So in terms of the collective, which is, what this evolutionary path, is heading into, is a profound commitment to the well-being of life on Earth. This brings people at this level into communion with each other and with all beings. It creates a powerful energy field that's filled with meaning and purpose. It attracts others who radiate this level of spiritual energy. There, the wisdom and compassion are amplified many, many times over. There is at the same time a deep acceptance of all that is unfolding across inconceivably vast reaches of time and space. So, turquoise level is not gradually realized. It's like a cosmic thunderbolt. It hits you. It's the sudden embodied realization of our deep cosmic home and function in the universe as an expression of its ceaseless, vast, creative intelligence. How we uniquely shape this expression is up to us, like every being in existence. At its unshakable core is our vow. Together, as Joko pointed out, we become a much larger channel for life itself, for its effervescent sparkle and luminous light. Our purpose, our function, is continuously revealing itself to us moment by moment. There's no return now to earlier ways of perception, just things as it is, and our sense of being at home in the cosmos. So what is that environment that turquoise perceives? The vast connection between our individual lives, our communities, and the entire cosmos. The deep, profound meanings and purpose of the Buddha's teachings. Their reach across space and time, and the awesome responsibility for relieving suffering and liberating all beings. This is breathtaking when we really realize the scope and scale of it. The Bodhisattva vow echoes throughout the cosmos. When we liberate ourselves, we liberate the world. Even in our confusion, our self-doubt, our fears about the future, our regrets about the past, we are nevertheless fully expressing Buddha activity. So, we're out of time, right? Running out of time?
About 12 minutes, 13 minutes over right now.
Well, okay, all right.
7:53.
Okay, so this is where we have in the Shin Shin Ming this part of the chant that says, let go of self-doubt and you can trust the universe completely. That's what that's about. That's turquoise level thinking. All is empty, brilliant, perfect in its own being. So that's probably a fun place to stop, you know. I think when we think in terms of community, I think, oh, okay, so all these levels are present. They're all accessible. There may be occasions in life conditions in which we have to return to one of those levels, right, in order to survive and thrive. But we always are aware of what the trajectory is, where we are headed, what we are intending, what our place is. So even, for example, in New Orleans, when everybody was thrown back into beige level after Hurricane Katrina, when they returned, you know, to some semblance of normality, they could recover all of those levels up to the one where they were. But transitions are hard and difficult, and tomorrow I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how those transitions happen, what Graves discovered from his data, and what he understood about how change really happens. Okay, all right, sorry to be over.